What if I told you that the golden age of serial killers might not have ended at all? What if it just seems that way because the spotlight moved? What if the thing that killed the serial killer was us? Or more specifically, the media.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Hey, welcome to Breakfast Cereal. My name's Josh. If you're new here, this is part of a series I've been building called Where Did All the Serial Killers Go? Each episode, I tackle one theory about that so-called golden age of serial killers. You know, the one that peaked in the 70s and 80s and seemed to suddenly dry up by the 90s. I've talked about DNA. That episode was a big one. I looked into how science finally caught up with the monsters. Another episode I talked about lead poisoning, how an environmental toxin might have bred a whole generation of violence. I've talked about long-haul truckers, the highways, how killers may have not vanished but just taken to the roads. And I even did an episode about the idea that they didn't disappear at all, they just evolved or morphed into like mass shooters. And every time I put one of these out, the comment sections blow up. Some of them have thousands of comments. People debating, sharing their own theories, agreeing with mine, challenging me, calling me a fucking idiot, expanding the conversation. And I love it all. I read them all because this isn't about me just delivering answers. Most of the time I don't have any, but I do have a lot of questions. And it's about us kind of working through the mystery together. So if you're new here, hit subscribe, jump into the comments, because this is really a community project. And today's theory is one I've been sitting with for a while. Because every time I watch the old news footage, like every time I see how Bundy here was, paraded around on camera like a rock star.
Deceptive, manipulative.
He's also a former social worker and a political campaign activist.
Every time I see the circus around Richard Ramirez, I wonder, did the media actually create the golden age of serial killers? And when it stopped giving them the spotlight, did it kill them too? Let's set the stage. In the 1970s and 80s, there wasn't Netflix. There wasn't TikTok. There wasn't a constant flood of distraction. There was TV. There were newspapers. Maybe a couple of channels you trusted for your nightly news. And what sold? Fear. So if you look at charts, studies of local and national TV news show that crime stories routinely made up anywhere from 25 to 50% of broadcasts, even though actual crime rates didn't justify that. I mean, I've talked about it in a couple other videos on this channel. If it bleeds, it leads. Murder made headlines, especially weird murder. Murders that didn't make sense. Murders that were sexual, bizarre, ritualistic, horrifying. That's exactly what a serial killer was. They weren't random guys with guns. They were strange, exotic predators. And the media leaned in. Ted Bundy, he wasn't just a killer. He was a character. Gacy, he wasn't just a contractor, he was killer clown. Dahmer wasn't just a man with urges, he was the Milwaukee Cannibal. I mean, the nicknames alone could be a branding master class. Think about it. What happens when the news decides that's the story? That's what you hear at dinner, that's what you see on TV, or what your kids whisper about at school. The killers became celebrities. And what do celebrities attract? Copycats. One of the earliest examples of this media the feedback loop was the Zodiac killer. Here's a guy who terrorized California in the late 60s and 70s, and half the reason he's remembered today isn't because of his body count, it's because of his branding. He wrote letters to newspapers. He gave himself a logo. He demanded coverage, and the media gave it to him. The San Francisco Chronicle, the guy there, Robert Graysmith, that cartoonist, he's the one who came up with this drawing. Think about that. The newspaper prints your letters, your ciphers, your threats, your terrifying image. They put your logo in ink on millions of doorsteps. You don't just become a killer, you become a myth. Now imagine being some unstable guy in the 70s, angry, violent, desperate for recognition. You're sitting in a small apartment watching Walter Cronkite talk about the Zodiac killer. You think, that could be me. I could be somebody too. I mean, it's not to say the media caused the Zodiac, but it gave him exactly what he wanted, and it broadcasted his playbook to anyone else watching. Now, Ted Bundy might be the clearest example of how the media turned a murderer into a star. When he was on trial in Florida, the courtroom was full of reporters. This hadn't been seen like this before. Cameras broadcast his smirk, his charm, his outbursts. Women wrote fan mail. We've been over this on this channel. I mean, he even did this.
Carol, do you want to marry me? I want to marry you.
Yeah. In case you couldn't catch all that was him proposing to a woman in court in front of the cameras. So tell me that doesn't sound like reality TV. And if you think I'm exaggerating, go pull up some more footage from Bundy's trial. Like this.
Are there any dates set on any other trials, even with acquittal?
Yes. Well, if I was a football coach, I'd say, when you're the first game of the season, you don't start looking for the Super Bowl.
Okay, so here's where I want to throw a chart up on the screen. So if you watch this channel often, you knew this chart was coming, right? Okay, this graph chart, whatever you want to call it, shows the number of serial killers active each year, peaking in the 70s and 80s. I mean, it's the chart I've shown on so many episodes. But let's add another line. Media coverage of violent crime. I mean, the two don't just overlap. They move almost in sync. When violent crime is front page news, serial killers surge. When coverage shifts to politics, to terrorism, to mass shootings, the serial killers fall off. I mean, I guess you could say chicken and egg though, right? Correlation isn't causation. But I mean, again, like a lot of these things, you can't ignore the pattern. Are you old enough to remember the 90s? Because I am, mostly. I remember flipping through channels. Every news segment seemed to have some big monster headline, like Dahmer's face, O.J. Simpson's Bronco. Then a few years later, Columbine. And it changed. The obsession shifted. It wasn't about one man killing quietly in the shadows anymore. It was about sudden explosions of violence. School shootings, terrorism, 9/11. The serial killer just disappeared from the news. But here's the thing. Crime didn't disappear. People didn't stop being twisted. It just stopped being the story we were told. The spotlight moved. Suddenly, instead of Bundy on TV, it was Timothy McVeigh. It was Columbine. It was 9/11. Then the Iraq War. Then Virginia Tech. Then Sandy Hook. Mass violence became the story. Terrorism became the story. And just like that, the serial killer faded from public consciousness. If nobody's watching, nobody's performing. Now let me be clear. I'm not saying serial killers only existed because of media coverage. That would be way too simplistic. Some people are gonna kill no matter what. The compulsion is too strong. DNA and better policing definitely cut them down too. But if we're asking why the epidemic seemed to end, why the cluster of killers in the 70s and 80s hasn't seemed to repeat, I think the media's role can't just be ignored either. See, the media is a mirror, but it's also a magnifying glass. It shows us ourselves, but it also distorts and enlarges whatever it focuses on. When it focused on serial killers, we got more of them. Or at least, we noticed more of them. When it shifted to mass shootings and terrorism, that's what multiplied in the public's imagination. So, the real question is, what do we create by choosing what to look at? If a killer falls in the woods and nobody reports on it, does he even exist in the cultural sense? Do monsters need an audience? So what do you think? Did the media create the golden age of serial killers? Or just document it? And most unsettling of all, what if the next wave of violence is already here, and we've simply chosen to cover it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. And if you're new here, hey, hit subscribe. This is just one theory in an ongoing series. Because the mystery isn't solved. The monsters might not be gone. They just might be waiting for the camera to turn back their way.